I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. I'm going to say a bunch of other thanks in just a second to people who truly deserve them, but I want to thank all of you here, especially from the bottom of my heart, for being here this evening. It is so great to see so many people here gathered in the campus center for such an auspicious event. And that we're able to do this. Not having been able to do this for over 2.5 years, basically, it is just great to see so many people gathered to something like this. So I just warmly thank you all for being here at the University of Maine at Presque Isle for an event like this, and we hope to have more events like this as we continue to come out of what we've all been through the last 2.5 years. So just my thanks to all of you for being here. So as I said, welcome to this very special event. I'm going to lean down just a little bit because obviously this is set for somebody a little bit, more my daughter's height. So I am Ray Rice, president of the University of Maine at Presque Isle. We are in for a truly unique evening tonight, celebrating the true essence of our region, individuals who comprise the heart of Aroostook. And I know you've seen that in the mailings that went out, which I think just perfectly captures everything we'll hear tonight. Our evening's program is in 3 parts, including stories about friends of the county and the values we hold so dear connected to this place that we call home. Even if some of us aren't from here originally, such as myself, I'm a Flatlander, but having been here 26 years, I think I can call this home now, and I appreciate everybody's forbearance in that regard. And a memoir and a launch of a wonderful book that I truly had the privilege to read several months ago, and it's just a truly wonderful book. And our dedication and naming of the auditorium. And that'll be the 3rd part that we'll do after the reading. So without further ado, let us begin here. And it's my special privilege to introduce Catherine Olmsted, who has long chronicled life in northern Maine. In fact, when I go home to East Longmeadow, Massachusetts, which is in western Massachusetts, my mother received Echoes magazine for 15, 18 years, and she always has a copy by her rocking chair where she's sitting, and I think she's at the point in time sometimes, it's like reading them anew again now. So she very much appreciates Echoes and always asks after the magazine, and it connected her to this wonderful place where I was for this last quarter of a century. And so that kind of chronicling is so important and so amazing from Catherine Olmsted. Although not originally from Aroostook County, once she arrived from away, she's never looked back. Catherine grew up in Michigan and has been a journalist, a teacher, a faculty member at the University of Maine at Orono, and editor of the former Echoes magazine that chronicled the rural culture of Aroostook County, celebrating the values of a place and creating a sense of identity and pride. She is a friend and strong community supporter of the county, as we like to call it, the place that we truly call home. So Catherine will lead things off with an introduction and a tribute to the stories of individuals from the county. And with that, let me turn it over to Catherine.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Okay, I'll have to lean down too. Well, when Deb Rourke invited me to be part of this ceremony, I wondered, why me? This is all about Ray and Sandy Gauvin and their contributions to the place where they grew up. I'm from away. But Deb and President Ray Rice envisioned the Gauvins' generosity as an example of a broader trait that runs deep in Aroostook County, a sense of place. They wanted to create a context for the event, highlighting the qualities of this place that inspire its natives to give back to it. For there really is something about Aroostook County that generates gratitude in its residents. So I'm delighted to help honor past gifts and a new one, A Soldier's Heart, the 3 Wars of Vietnam. Believe me, you will not forget this book, beginning with Ray's struggles as a French-speaking child with undiagnosed dyslexia, and ending with the revelations that emerged when he discovered that the demons that had been plaguing him for years were the severe effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. Ray's memoir gives voice to countless victims of PTSD, as well as those who have endured learning difficulties and cultural discrimination. It is genuinely heartfelt and a valuable addition to the stories of Aroostook. So today's theme, the heart of Aroostook, reflects both this new personal history and the qualities that produce an intense fondness for this corner of Maine. When I moved here in 1974, I was amazed at the number of people who had returned to live here after living elsewhere. Some of them retired here. Some returned after college. Others took mid-career pay cuts in order to live here. And others remembered visiting relatives as children and decided that they wanted to raise their families here. This phenomenon intrigued me. These people weren't just returning to Maine, they were returning to a particular county. This person from away wanted to know why, so I asked them. And I published their answers in a weekly column in the Aroostook Republican called They Came Back. You might recognize some of the names of those who were featured. John Hedman and Walter Anderson of New Sweden, Robert Sawyer of Ashland, Ronald Dow of Easton, who used to teach here, Elizabeth Hamilton of Caribou, its first female mayor, John Heed of Stockholm, still writing, Bob and Sue Stead of New Sweden, Daniel Sear of Limestone, Ruth Lockhart of Fort Fairfield, Dr. David Smith of Caribou, Jean Wright of Presque Isle. Each story was different, but several common themes emerged from the interviews. People came back to Aroostook County for the pace of life, the beauty, the closeness to nature, and most of all, the people. Warm, genuine, friendly people. They remembered living in a place where bank clerks, tellers, and postal clerks greet you by name. They remembered a place where you could leave your car unlocked when you run into the post office. They remembered a place where you're allowed to hang your laundry outside on the line to dry. And if you break down on the highway, you know someone will stop to help and you won't have to be afraid. Imagine a daily commute in stop-and-go traffic, 2 hours to travel 30 minutes on a freeway to a job where you might face some unfriendly competition to succeed. Imagine having to drive hours to hunt, fish, ski, hike, snowmobile, when once you stepped out your door to do those things. Imagine, this is the big one with me, not being able to see the Big Dipper or the Milky Way or the Northern Lights. Not everyone can call up those memories, but if you're from here, you can, and you'll miss those things. They Came Back appeared in the Aroostook Republican in 1977. Now, 45 years later, I have a file of news clippings of people who have returned to Aroostook County in the last few years. It includes stories about Caribou natives, Doctors Abby and Paige Small, Christina Kane Gibson, Dr. Caleb Swanberg, Tim Conroy, Dr. Miranda Record of Parham, Chelsea Lee Reynolds DeRozier of New Sweden, Toby Jondro of St. Francis and Fort Kemp, Don and Dana Appleby of St. John, and the Van Buren contingent, musician Travis Sear, and generations of Rossignol's, Matt and his children, Paris, Dominique, and Andre, Mark and his children, Jordan, Jared, and Jatil. You can probably think of many others. The natives do continue to return. But that column in the 1970s was just a beginning. I really discovered the magnetism of Aroostook County with the publication of Echoes between 1988 and 2017. When I met Gordon Hammond, co-founder, our first conversations were about the qualities of life we had discovered in moving to Aroostook. I grew up in Battle Creek, Michigan, and settled in Westmoreland. He grew up in Long Island, New York, and settled in Westfield. In Westfield and Westmoreland, we discovered traditional values that we knew were vanishing elsewhere in the nation. Community, courtesy, ingenuity, hard work, and conservation before we started recycling, the waste not, want not ethic. And let me add, I just got back from my high school class reunion where I was told to be sure and lock my car at night because someone would go through it if I didn't. And where the neighbors of the friends where I stayed woke up one morning to find out that someone had dug up the flowers in their garden and stolen them. This is my hometown. I would never have believed that in this nice little middle-class neighborhood in what used to be a country road. So Gordon and I wanted to publish the stories of this place that we had discovered before they too disappeared, because we felt they had a message for the future. It wasn't just about nostalgia. Would people buy and read a magazine celebrating life lived simply with deep respect for nature? Many of you know the answer to the question. Echoes revealed an affection for Aroostook County, not just among the natives who would return, but also those living in every one of the United States and a few parts of Canada and Europe. Echoes readers felt intensely about the quality of life they had known here. The farther away they lived, the stronger their feelings about the place they had left behind. Who knew, for example, that Aroostook County natives in San Bernardino, California met regularly just because they were from Aroostook County? We found out when we got a flurry of subscription orders from San Bernardino and found out that it was because someone had bought a copy of Echoes to one of those gatherings. Who knew that people in Brewer and perhaps the whole Bangor area met regularly, where they even sang their own song? I can't imagine such a gathering of people from Calhoun County, Michigan, honestly. Aroostook County people have a common bond wherever they go in life. They are proud and grateful to have lived here. Echoes ignited that connection and brought people together on its pages, just as the gatherings here and there across the country. Even county natives who do not return remember their home. Francis Malcolm never forgot his youth on the family farm in Easton. And when he died in 1977, his will provided the funding and 400 acres for the Francis Malcolm Science Center. Mary Barton Akeley Smith of Presque Isle also made her home in California, but honored her parents and her husband with generous gifts to the Mark and Emily Turner Library and the Northern Maine Community College in her hometown. So what is it about this place? I have come to believe that people raised in a culture and an economy rooted in nature identify with that place wherever they go in life. They have confidence that home will always be there and they'll always be part of it. They know who they are. They have a particular identity with their place. We heard from an Aroostook County native living in the Southwest whose neighbors doubted that the place she described as home was real. She thought a copy of Echoes would provide evidence. But it wasn't the stories or the pictures that convinced the doubters. They decided Aroostook was real because the magazine contained advertising. Clearly, the quality of life we enjoy here is rare. The beauty is breathtaking. Nature is close. The pace is sane, and people care about each other. But we can't take it for granted. Even with all its wonderful attributes, Aroostook County is losing its residents, mostly young people. The workforce is shrinking, the population is aging, and Aroostook's level of poverty is third highest in the state. The future of this place is at risk. It must be nurtured, and that's why we are here today. Enter Ray and Sandy Gauvin with this fantastic idea for keeping the best of Aroostook's young people right here. The Aroostook Aspirations Initiative rewards outstanding high school students not only with scholarships, but also academic and professional mentoring and networking to prepare them for a future in the place they call home. It reinforces the pride that the county natives discover after they leave. AAI gives young people reasons and opportunities to stay here. It started with a scholarship program for Presque Isle High School students 20 years ago. The success of the scholarships inspired the Gauvins to expand the program to every high school in the county. To date, more than 270 students have received approximately $200,000 in scholarship assistance. 95% of these students graduate from college in Aroostook County as well as Thomas College in Waterville. And those who choose to stay in Aroostook explain their decisions with comments like these. Quote, I chose to stay in Aroostook County because home is a feeling and not a place. And you can't get that Aroostook feel anywhere else, said Megan Cole, a 2017 scholar from Washburn. Emily Driscoll, also of Washburn, said, I chose to stay in Aroostook County because people here work to benefit each other as much as they work to benefit themselves. Alexis Albert, a 2020 scholar from Madawaska, said, one of my favorite things about Aroostook County is having easy accessibility to what nature has to offer during all 4 seasons. It isn't everywhere you go that you could experience beautiful sunshine, foliage, and snow all in the same week. The county is also unique in the sense that everyone is willing to help anyone who needs it. The county's tight-knit communities are known to always come together to support one of their own. And 2020 scholar Casey Chapman of Presque Isle said, I was previously blinded by the idea of living in a more populated area, but I have since realized there are many things Aroostook County can provide for me that nowhere else can. It is a place that teaches kids integrity, work ethic, and love. I want to graduate, find employment, and raise a new generation right here in Aroostook County. How many places in this country produce young people with values like these? How many people create opportunities for young people to express these ideas? The Gauvins are examples of the qualities that make Aroostook special. And it is time to thank them for giving the county's future leaders reasons to stay here. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I do want to say, as I said, as somebody from Massachusetts, when I first arrived here, and I think it was a shop and save, and it was during the winter time, and I parked my car, locked it, right, because that's what you always do in Massachusetts. And all these cars were running, and I'm like, what's going on? Is everybody like sitting in their car? And there's nobody in the cars because they're all in the supermarket. And that's when I realized, wow, I'm in a really different place. So I just echo that experience amazingly. So I'm very pleased now to introduce someone, and I'm pleased not only because Jason Parent, who's of course the Executive Director and CEO of the Aroostook County Action Program, has done such amazing things in Aroostook County himself at multiple organizations and is doing such important critical things for these communities in Aroostook County right now as the CEO of ACAP. My thanks to Jason for that every single day for the work that you do. I also want to brag just a little bit. He's also an UMPI alum, so I'm very pleased to be able to introduce him in that regard as well, and a former member of our Board of Visitors who was such a vital a part of that group. I also want to do a shout out to Steve Richard, who's, I forget where you are, Steve. I see him right there, who was our chair of the Board of Visitors for the last 6 years. So under, and worked with me and told me how to be a president. So I will always thank you for that. The two of them have been so important for the Board of Visitors. But Jason, a co-founder, and also serves on the board of the Aroostook Aspirations Initiative right now. He's been part of the group since its founding by Ray and Sandy. Jason will give you an introduction for a man so many of you know, and that is Ray Gauvin. So with that, let me ask Jason to come up here.
Thank you very much, President Rice, for that very kind introduction. And I was told by Sandy that I had 3 minutes to introduce Ray, and I may blow that by just a couple, but I promise I will stay within that. What I really wanted to do, first of all, was to express how pleased and honored I am to introduce my mentor, one of my very fortunate, as a fortunate individual to have as one of my mentors, Mr. Ray Gauvin. You heard many of the wonderful things that Ray and Sandy, because it's always Ray and Sandy, because Sandy is steadfastly by his side at all times, have accomplished for Aroostook County and for the people of the state of Maine. But what I really wanted to focus in on this evening was the personal connection with Ray and how much he has meant to me, both as a friend and a mentor throughout that time. And I cannot think of a better evening to celebrate stories. What we're really celebrating this evening are stories. We're celebrating Ray's story. We're celebrating Ray and Sandy's story. I was honored to be an advanced reader of A Soldier's Heart. And I could have given it a number of different titles. It could have easily been A Son's Heart, A Father's Heart, A Leader's Heart, A Humanitarian's Heart. Ray is all of those things and so much more. And he's touched so many lives in this room. Ray and I first met when I went to Northern Maine Community College to become the Director of Community Relations and work with the foundation there. And in our time working together there, Ray and I knew how to drive each other just the right way. We were both very driven, and we both became fast friends because of our shared Franco-American and Acadian culture, which I was so pleased to read captured in the pages of A Soldier's Heart. Ray's journey as a young man from literally the wrong side of the tracks that lived in what was considered the French ghetto of Presque Isle at the time was a story that resonated with me, resonated with my family, resonated with my roots. And I could not be more proud that he chose to capture that story, the critical importance of that story, and what so many other individuals in Aroostook County and other communities across the state faced in terms of the additional obstacles to becoming the success that Ray and Sandy have been, and the supporters and the leaders that they have become in this community. The opportunity to work side by side and to support Ray and Sandy through the founding of the Aroostook Aspirations Initiative was a true honor. The opportunity to benefit future generations that will continue to pay it forward in Aroostook County was an experience that I will never forget, and something that I'm eternally grateful that you invited me along on that journey. Ray is so many things to so many people. And we only know the tip of the iceberg of all of those things. As much that we know about Ray and Sandy's philanthropy, their generosity, their encouragement of other people, there are volumes behind that. And to work closely with them, as I've had the opportunity to do, has provided me a glimpse into that work and into those efforts. The story of Soldier's Heart and the reason why we're here today, part of that being the reason why we're here today, was one that I could not put down because it truly helped me understand why Ray is the man that he is. And by that, I'm referring to the perseverance and the ability for him to overcome the circumstances with which he was faced from childhood to losing his father, to becoming the head of the household, to essentially working through the demons that Vietnam left, in addition to the time that he spent in Vietnam and the vivid detail in which we were all taken through that story, and the vulnerability with which Ray shared his life story in ways that had been kept even from his own memory throughout his life. And when I pause and reflect upon the words in that book and the story that Ray told through A Soldier's Heart, it just amazes me all the more as to what he has been able to accomplish with his family by his side and with others in this community, because Ray has been a community leader for his entire career. He has helped with organizations that are doing great things in this community. The United Way of Aroostook has a lot to credit to Ray's work. His employees, some of who are here in this room, his business partners. He grew a very successful business, but he always paid it forward. He always gave back to his community. And he did that with his heart and his passion and everything in him, while he also cared for his family. That is the mark of a true gentleman. That is a mark of a leader. That is a mark of a successful man. And I'm so pleased to have been able to be a small part of his journey. People come into your lives for seasons and for reasons, and I'm so glad that I get to have this season of my life and share it with a gentleman like Ray Gauvin. It's been a true pleasure and honor. But I want to go back to the theme of stories this evening. And when we connect with stories, because we're connecting with Ray's story in this case tonight, but Ray's story is the story of the people of Aroostook County. And tonight we're going to connect that so beautifully because we're going to be dedicating a place this evening where stories are told, where people are informed and entertained. And I think about my own life story with this institution, with Wedeen Hall. I remember being a freshman at freshman orientation, sitting in Wedeen Hall when the dean of students, who scared the bejesus out of me by telling us to look to our left and look to our right and figure out which one of the two people sitting next to you wasn't going to make it to graduation. We were back in this room, and I thought, this is a fine start. What if I'm the person not making it to graduation? But then I also remember coming to see wonderful musical productions like Jesus Christ Superstar and others in Wedeen Auditorium when the Pioneer Playhouse was happening, and when community events, or the very first year that we launched then Aroostook Idol, Northern Star for United Way, those things happen in that place. Stories are told, memories are made. So I could not think of a more fitting way to sort of thread the needle this evening between the story that is Ray Gauvin's life and the many stories that are left to unfold in this wonderful place, on this wonderful campus, in this community that we all feel so passionately about, and that we all have to thank Ray Gauvin for helping make life better, which is the slogan of my agency, but which is the life work that Ray Gauvin has, along with Sandy. It's always Ray and Sandy. But I want to thank you, Ray, from the bottom of my heart. And I am so honored to introduce you now to people who have come here, whose lives you have touched, and for every one person in this room, there are thousands more in this county, including the youth who you have touched through the Aroostook Aspirations Initiative. And I know that you are not stopping and you are not ceasing, and the work and the wonderful things that are to come, I've gotten a glimpse of them, are just tremendous and are going to change Aroostook County once again for the better because of your input and your contributions to this community and to this county. And so without further ado, please welcome to the podium my friend, my mentor, Ray Gauvin.
Is this being taped? I hope so, because I'm going to take that little snippet, so next time I'm sitting in front of Jason trying to make a point, I'll be able to pull that snippet out on my iPad. This is what you said about me, Jason. Listen. Thank you very much, Jason. Very gracious of you to say those wonderful things about Sandy and I. Excuse me. I have a tendency to lose my voice in the evening, so. And Catherine, thank you very much for your presentation. Very nice. I have been fortunate, very fortunate in my lifetime to do a lot of traveling. I've been to the four corners of the United States. I've been to many foreign. You can't hear me? Okay. I'm going to have to do what Catherine did. Put my head down here. Thank you. No, because I'm going to.
You can read off it.
Yeah.
Stick it over here, maybe. Got a little
Let's
better.
try. Yeah. Can you hear me now? Hear me now? Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you. I've been fortunate enough to do the traveling, and also throughout the world too. I've visited many foreign countries, and one of the things that I've always said after visiting those foreign countries that it was years later when I figured it out why Aroostook County was such a special place, and its sense of community. That's what the difference was. And all of the places that I've been to was a sense of community. So thank you for those stories tonight. Well, I've written a book, as you know, about 52 pages. And so while writing this presentation tonight, I decided that, that it had to be a little longer than the book, all right? So it's 268 pages, my presentation tonight. So I apologize. I know they said it was only going to be an hour and a half, but I just kept on writing and writing and writing. And if I don't read all the way through it, the story will not be complete. So I'll have to read through it tonight. Kidding you. So don't get nervous. Thank you, President Rice, for the introduction. Thank you for coming tonight. This is indeed a very special evening for me and for Sandy. Before we begin, I would like to thank the following people who have worked to put this event together. Dr. Ray Rice, who you've met, President of the University of Maine at Presque Isle, Dr. Debbie Rourke, who's in Texas right now, Executive Director, Kathy Homestead for her contribution this evening, my wife Sandy, and the University of Maine at Presque Isle for sponsoring this event, and all of the alumni who are here this week. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Sarah Bushy, who has been my editorial assistant, if you may. She's been a lot of help. I used to have a teacher in high school. I used to love looking through the windows, and I think some of my classmates are here, and they'll probably know who I'm talking about, but loved to throw erasers at me because I was always looking out through the window. So if anyone has an apple or tomatoes tonight or something, and if I'm, if you can't hear me, just throw the tomato at me or something, all right? So. I thought before I start my presentation, I would read you an excerpt illustrating what people are saying about my book. And it reads as follows. Ray Gauvin shows hands down that you do not have to be on the front lines to experience the horrors of war and its effects on the human psyche. Trapped in a job no unwilling person would have to face, seeing day in and day out the casualties of war, the mangled bodies of our soldiers, the author is forced to see visions that can't easily be unseen later. His shocking assignment in Vietnam certainly set the stage for a PTSD environment for even the most hardened soldier, let alone someone new to combat. When exposed to such horrific images, such as he was, you can't even unsee them. They are seared into your brain forever. You can only find help to deal with them. You'll also see how PTSD affects not only the veteran, but also the family, friends, and business associates. You don't need to be injured in a war to feel its effects. This is written by Judy Carroll, Colonel, retired United States Army. For those of you who don't know me, I am Ray Gauvin, and I have been diagnosed with chronic, severe PTSD. As you know, PTSD is not a new thing. Over the years, the military has used different terms to describe the repercussions from wars on the soldiers who fought them. In the Civil War, soldiers suffering from depression were said to have soldier's heart. In World War I, the term was shell shock. In World War II, in Korea, it was called combat fatigue. It wasn't until the Vietnam War and its aftermath for the term itself and our understanding of the condition to slowly turn into what it still is, post-traumatic stress disorder. The words being very clinical and detached. Out of all those terms, only soldier's heart would remind us of the human being who fought for their country. As did many of my fellow Vietnam War veterans, I fought more than one war. There was my assignment in Saigon. There was the aftermath of Agent Orange. And finally, there was PTSD. Thus, I named my book, A Soldier's Heart, The Three Wars of Vietnam. Every soldier of war has their own story to tell. This is only one, and it's mine, and I'm glad to be able to share it with you tonight. I grew up financially poor, emotionally wealthy, and academically overdrawn. Some of my classmates will laugh and they know. I had challenges during my childhood, as does every child, but growing up in the idyllic arms of a large French Acadian family, my life was good, for the most part. So when I received my orders to go to Vietnam in 1967 at the ripe old age of 21, I had absolutely no idea that the rest of my life would be forever radically changed, and not for the better, by my experience over there. I had no idea I would become part of a military unit whose existence and mission have remained completely unknown to the general public and to most of the military for the past 50 years. That I would be faced with images that I would never be able to unsee and that have haunted me for more than 2/3 of my life. That the pervasive odors of decaying bodies and formaldehyde are smells I will never forget. That the memories of those nearly 1,000 dead soldiers that I worked on will be permanently etched in my mind. And what's equally as bad is the fallout from my experience, my soldier's heart, has deeply affected not only me, but people that I have loved and worked with. It has been a demon within me for more than 50 years. It wasn't until 2008 that I hit a brick wall and had to face my problem head on after a severe injury to my foot, which laid me up for 3 months. I wasn't able to run away from that demon anymore, literally or figuratively. That was the beginning of the end of my well-kept secret, what I did in Vietnam. Although Sandy suspected that I had suffered from PTSD many years before this. My PTSD touched and consumed every part of my life. I knew something was broken inside, but I had no idea what it was. I always feared about talking about the war and what I did there for fear of losing control, breaking down, or crying. After all, that's not what big, brave soldiers were supposed to do. My PTSD wasn't unique. Many Vietnam vets came home and stayed to themselves. They didn't talk about the war, and generally they didn't even talk with other vets until years later. Vietnam veterans lost more than people in war. They lost ideals, belief in their leaders, the innate knowledge that nothing really bad can happen. Some lost hope. Some even lost the ability to love or trust or care for anyone. Some became frozen in rage and in time because they felt betrayed by their country and their communities. For many, even recovery is not a cure. I often ask myself, how did I keep Sandy's and my relationship together? That's the question I've asked myself for 45 years. I can say that it was not easy, especially on the part of my wife. We kept going day by day, hour by hour, and sometimes even minute by minute. But we kept trying, struggling through the clashes, the miscommunications, and the inappropriate behavior. I know that you are never cured of PTSD, but you can learn to deal with it effectively and mitigate some of the symptoms: sleeplessness, anger, depression, avoidance, isolation, substance abuse, anxiety, suicide, etc. I know that seems like a daunting list, and it is. It certainly was for me. But if you learn your trigger and what can set you off, you can manage things better. Matter of fact, you can also stay married. I've come to realize that peace doesn't dwell in things, but within our soul. It is my journey to find that path to my soul for the elusive thing that I call peace of mind. My early inspiration to write this book was to educate my readers about the classified mission that I participated in while serving in Vietnam, the work we did, and the ramification of that mission. I wanted to show the transition from a child growing up in Aroostook County to a soldier in Vietnam to the person I became because of the wartime experience. It was important for me to illustrate the effects of PTSD on those veterans and all who are connected to that veteran. And I wanted to use the writing of this book as a tool for my healing and a step to regaining my peace of mind. Although I'm still haunted by those events, I feel that this book has provided me with a cleansing of my mind and a validation of all my memories. It is my hope that this book will help those veterans that are suffering from PTSD a soldier's heart, as well as their spouses who want to know how to help their veterans and how to survive the experience. For those in search of a different perspective on the ghastliness of this complex war, this memoir is an instructive and effective remembrance. It is my hope that it will help to inform people that wars are seldom the solution to long-term peace. I would now like to take this opportunity to thank my publisher, Friesen Press, my book reviewers, Major Lane, and everyone who helped make this book possible. I want to thank my friends and family who have supported me through this process. It's been a long journey. I couldn't have done it without you. Your encouragement has meant the world to me. I also want to thank my kids, who often had no idea how I would behave or if I would explode at any given moment as they were growing up. Thank you for forgiving me and letting me enjoy being a part of your life. I especially want to thank my wife, Sandy, who's earned the distinction of hero in her own right. She has followed me through my PTSD for the last 50 years, with its ups and downs, challenges, curves, hills, and winding roads, along with all of the heartaches and tears. Her unsung devotion to a man that she could have left many times over to escape certain madness has saved my life. As she helped me create this labor of love called A Soldier's Heart, the 3 wars of Vietnam. I would like to read to you a poem that I wrote as part of my recovery. It talks about the feelings I had as I was under the influence, if you will, of my PTSD. And it's called Peace of Mind. My peace of mind. Where is this elusive idea? I love you through my uncontrollable anger, in between my fits of rage, but I don't know how to restrain myself. I need to be happy. But I just can't turn myself around. I see you in the answer every time I pray, but then I get angry and take off from the room, and I wish you hadn't gone. My love just wants to hold your hand, but my anger doesn't care. I feel the pain you carry. It really isn't right. The real hero here in this tragedy is you, who has stayed with me through days and days of not knowing whether I would ever change. All I want from you is forever to remember me as loving you. My mind just can't see through the clouds. I'm in the clouds most of the time, but please help me understand. Will I ever be the person I used to be? Or will alcohol or suicide do me in? Thank you. Not a problem. I gave our country everything the day I went to war. I thought the cost would be my life, but it turned out to be much worse. The thousands of faces I see every day will never come home. When will this nightmare end? Will there be a lesson learned? Scars are all I have, when all I want is my peace of mind. So now they teach the young folks to act like war's a game, without any thought of how they'll feel when they come back home. Now we have more who seek peace of mind. A veteran's future happiness is their peace of mind. After all, they've earned it. Oh Lord, 45 years is long enough. My journey wants to end now. Please give me peace of mind. Tonight, I have chosen my reading to be a prologue of A Soldier's Heart. How many of you have read my book? Oh, quite a few. Wow. In 1968, when I boarded an air-conditioned Boeing 707 headed for Vietnam, there were 536,100 American troops there ahead of me. Up until that time, the Pentagon and the American public had seen the war as winnable and soon to end. But the first Tet Offensive had riddled the country with fighting a few months earlier. It was a massive Viet Cong attack that broke the unspoken truce on the Lunar New Year holiday of Tet. Tet 2 was already in progress when I landed in Vietnam. Tet changed the view of the war at home, and news of the massive casualties brought the whole war into question. I knew I would be desperately needed and put to good use. I've been trained at Fort Sam Houston as an X-ray technician and a combat medic, and yet the job description that I've been assigned only said WDMET. Other than those 5 letters of the alphabet, I had no other details. The month of May in Vietnam means mostly hot weather. The rains start in June, and for nearly 2 weeks in the sweltering heat, broken only by an occasional steamy rainfall in the afternoons, I cleaned latrines at Long Bend. It was a nasty job that smelled even worse than it looked. As I waited to be sent down to Saigon, we pulled steel drums out of the ground beneath the wooden toilets and set the waste on fire with diesel fuel. Despite feeling heartbroken over losing my girlfriend, despite feeling lost in a foreign land, despite the unrelenting heat and the smell of burning human waste, I couldn't help wondering, what the hell is WDMET? On June 6th, I finally got my orders to report to Tan Son Nhut Air Base on the southeast outskirts of Saigon. We had just received word that Robert Kennedy had been shot while campaigning in Los Angeles and that he was still clinging to life. Knowing that our country was in such unrest back home was not good for morale. My plan was to concentrate on my job, do my part in helping my fellow soldiers, and then in a year, I'd get the hell out of Vietnam. A country that didn't even want us there in the first place. The next afternoon, I was put aboard a helicopter and flown down to Tan Son Nhut. It was a relief to leave the smelly latrines behind. A Jeep was waiting for me at the helipad when I arrived, driven by the company clerk. I assumed he'd take me to headquarters where I would finally receive my job description. You, Gauvin? He gargled around the cigarette hanging precipitously from his mouth. I nodded. I'll drive you into Saigon, the clerk said. To your billet. Saigon? I asked. Why not the barracks with the other guys? At least I could check combat medic off my list of concerns. Combat medics weren't put into billets but sent to where the fighting was. The clerk hunched his shoulders. Tomorrow you'll meet Colonel Ostrom, our unit commander. He'll explain everything. You know, by this time I started really getting paranoid. This wasn't typical of the military. If I was going to be assigned to a medical unit, surely it was time to inform me. You'll be given your own Jeep for transportation, the clerk said, and an M16, which you'll be allowed to keep at the billet. I'll pick you up in the morning at 800 hours. My own Jeep? and an M16, for goodness sakes, I was an X-ray tech. After the first 10 offensive, soldiers in Vietnam were allowed to carry M16s. It was apparent to me by now that an M16 wasn't a bad idea if I was going to live in Saigon. In addition to the Viet Cong sympathizers on every street corner, rockets were still exploding all over the city and would continue to do so for the rest of my tour. I assumed I'd be driven to headquarters the next morning and would receive my job description. But when the clerk picked me up, we drove to the perimeter of the base. There were 3 long trailers there set up in a T shape. They were old and a drab green color, the kind that are pulled behind army trucks to carry freight. That's the mortuary, the clerk said. He pointed to the building next to the one of the trailers. There's another one in Da Nang, but much smaller. Da Nang takes care of the north. Down here at Tan Son Nhut, we get about 70% of the casualties. Mortuary? Well, we knew about the deaths, of course, but no one ever asked about how the bodies were taken care of in Vietnam. They just seemed to come home in those bellies of those big cargo planes. Not even the nightly newscasters or the protesters said the word mortuary. But I'm an X-ray tech, I said. Why am I here at the mortuary? He tossed me the set of keys. That's your Jeep parked over there. He pointed at a Jeep sitting in front of the second trailer. Its license plate said, you guessed it, WDMET. Think you can handle the traffic in Saigon? Just go with the flow. Why am I at the mortuary? I asked again. Wait here for Colonel Ostrom, was his answer. I stood along as the clerk drove off. The mortuary was far away enough from the base that it had its own generators, were noisy as hell. Why I had been brought there to meet my commanding officer was anybody's guess. As I waited, a Huey helicopter arrived in the blast of dust rising up from the nearby helipad. 2 soldiers crawled out and grabbed the straps of a large green bag. It was my first glimpse of an HRP, a human remains pouch, oftenly referred to as a body bag. They came back for a second bag, and a third, and a fourth. A few minutes later, they climbed back aboard, and the chopper took off in the dust and flew off. What the hell is going on? I thought. A Jeep pulled up in front of the trailers, and a colonel got out. It was my commanding officer, Colonel Thomas Ostrom. I saluted him. I bet you got a lot of questions for me, don't you, soldier? He asked. Yes, sir. Follow me, the colonel said. Now we're going to take a little pause here. Sure. Technology wonderful, huh? That last photo of me was taken just before I left Vietnam, and you may not have remembered the first photo that was taken, and that's when I first arrived. That's when I first arrived. Sorry. You might have seen the first photo, which was when I arrived in Vietnam, of myself, and then the last photo in the teaser was the day that I left Vietnam. So you could see really a big change in facial expressions. All right. And now, for the words that you've all been waiting for, finally, I'd like to thank you once again for coming to this event this evening. I will be available during the reception to talk with my guests. For anyone who wants to buy a book, there will be someone at the author's table to help you make that purchase. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Before we get to the third part of the stories this evening, I do want to say one quick thing. You know, before I was a president, I'm a professor of English, and I became a professor of English because I love narratives, right? I love stories. I've loved stories ever since I was a child. And Ray's story is so compelling personally to me, in part because my grandfather fought in World War I. And, you know, I listened to stories my grandfather told. He never, ever once spoke about his experience in World War I, ever. I never heard. And so my grandfather's stories are lost, right? And that's why I think narratives are so important to our culture, whether it's Aroostook County, particularly Aroostook County, but just human culture in general, because our narratives are our history. And if we don't give voice to those stories, we lose that piece of our history that is so important to us. And as someone, you know, that grew up in the 70s, early 70s, and just had glimpses of what was happening in Vietnam that Ray was experiencing directly, I only glimpsed through television, right, and Walter Cronkite and news reports that I only vaguely understood as a child. But that's why I want to thank him for the narrative, for the story he brings, because that is an essential history that my daughter needs to know, right? That we all need to know, and that we need to retain, and it needs to be part of who we are as a culture, as a society, as Aroostook County, as Americans. And so that's why I want to thank Ray so much for that, because that is why we are teachers, that's why we have universities, and that's why we tell stories. So that brings us to the third part of this very special evening, and this is the dedication of the auditorium in Wadeen Hall. You probably noticed that we're not in Wadeen Hall for this event, and partly it's because, well, you know, the campus center is an incredibly nice venue. It's also because Wadeen Hall is undergoing renovations, and it's off. It's closed to the public, and it's closed to any use whatsoever, including the auditorium side of Wadeen Hall. That will be reopening first week of January. So I always look to Betsy Espy, my CBO, to make sure we're still on schedule for that. And so what we'll be witnessing here, you will be seeing physically in Wadeen Hall upon its opening in the beginning of January. So what we're doing is giving you a glimpse of what we will be able to physically see come the beginning of the new year in 2023. And we will look forward to welcoming everyone here and other visitors to the space that we'll get a glimpse of this evening. As you are all aware, Ray and Sandy Gauvin are longtime advocates of higher education, community service, and the cultural arts, storytelling. 20 years ago, they co-founded the Aroostook Aspirations Foundation, a nonprofit that helps first-generation students complete their college education in Northern Maine and move into successful careers. And as people have said, their acts, their organization have touched thousands of individuals, and probably each one of us has family members touched in one way by their organization. For instance, my wife comes from a family of 14 siblings, and one of them was a recipient as a Gauvin Scholar and went to this institution, as were some of the people that Catherine quoted. So I always like to hear UMPI graduates being quoted in that regard. But that is just a sense of how their acts, how their actions and how their generosity has impacted so many individuals directly and indirectly in the county. During that time, over $300,000 in scholarships have been awarded to more than 226 college-going students through Aristocrat Aspirations initiatives in partnership with universities and colleges. Proudly, I can share that since 2014, approximately 50 of these Gauvin Scholars attended this institution here. Not only have the Gauvins provided much needed financial support for students and their families, their programming has also included community service, internships, and much needed mentorships to keep students enrolled and on track to college completion. The strength of these additional support services is truly reflected in the college graduation rates, much higher than the norm, with more than 90% of their scholars graduating from college. That is something worth repeating because that is a percentage that is almost unheard of in higher education. 90% of their scholars have graduated from institutions. And even more importantly for our region's workforce development is that more than 90% of those scholars are staying to live and work in Aroostook County. And if you look at that percentage, that is the gift that scholarships such as they have made possible give to our communities. Not only do they graduate those students, but those students stay in our communities. Those percentages are truly remarkable percentages. The scholars have completed programs in pharmacy, nursing, computer-aided drafting, geology, social work, business management, wind technology, environmental design, and aeronautical engineering. Ray and Sandy's generosity has extended here to the University of Maine at Presque Isle when they created their Reynold A. and Sandra H. Gauvin Family Scholarship in June 2003 in the university's foundation. More recently, and another reason we are gathered here today, is to celebrate the official naming of the auditorium, thanks to the first major gift toward the renovations in what has been known as Wadeen Auditorium. Built in 1960, our facility has served as a cultural arts center, which you heard from Jason and his experiences directly in that center, an academic training ground, and a public forum for the exchange of ideas. The 400-seat facility traditionally had been used an average of 2,300 hours per year and attracted a total yearly attendance of well over 50,000 people, but because of its deteriorating condition and outdated technology, its demand and occupancy have started to decline well through the past decade. To bring the facility back to its original glory, renovations are required, including new seating, stage floor, ceiling, stage curtains, dressing room, LED theatrical lighting, ADA accessibility improvements, and other technologies. Planning was in progress, and the Gauvin served on an auditorium planning committee to identify priority areas for funding and potential fundraising activities. These planning and fundraising activities will begin again now that we have started to move past these phases of the pandemic, as we see tonight. We are thus so pleased to have everyone gathered here today so we can thank Ray and Sandy for this first major gift and name the auditorium in their honor in this evening. I have and Kelly Martin, who serves on the Board of Trustees and has been such a wonderful representative to the board for several years now, sends her regrets because she had planned to be here this evening to say a few words, but was unable to make it this evening. I do know, in that regard, she contacted me earlier about her not being able to be here. I do have remarks from the Chancellor of the University of Maine System. I'll just read his remarks about the Gauvins. representing the University of Maine system and the Board of Trustees. And the Chancellor asked me to convey this. I wish I was able to be at UMPI in person this evening to participate in homecoming events and especially to pay tribute to the Gauvin family. Recently, I had the opportunity to have dinner with Ray and Sandy Gauvin at President Rice's house. They are lovely individuals, and I enjoyed that evening so very much. I was incredibly impressed with their dedication to Aroostook County, the success of the high school students that call the county home. The work of Aroostook Aspirations not only focuses on the educational success of the Gauvin scholars, but also allows for networking and mentoring opportunities that help with career readiness and offers experiential opportunities for recipients to develop a sense of community and civic responsibility, all incredibly important contributions that go far beyond the generous financial support that those students receive. Their generosity and philanthropy is not limited to educational opportunities, as demonstrated by the contributions offered to assist with the renovation of UMPI's auditorium, now aptly to be named in just a moment. On behalf of the University of Maine system, please accept my sincere thanks for your support for our universities, their programming, and our students. Also, my congratulations on the publication of your new book, Ray. I hope to see a signed copy on display in the Gauvin Family Center on my next trip to UMPI. I guess that's his indication to me that I'm supposed to buy the book for him to have you sign so that we can then put it on. So at this point, Betsy's going to come up and help with the unveiling here. And we have two things to unveil. The first, and moving from the left to the right, Catherine and I made sure we understood which one comes off first here. So first, you'll see the plaque, and this plaque will be located outside of the auditorium. Again, this is an artistic rendering of the plaque that is currently being assembled and that will be placed on the building in Wadene in early January after all of the renovations are done. We can't touch the building legally while the contractors are in it right now. So let me just read what it says here. The Gauvin Family Center for the Cultural Arts, named in honor of Reynold A. and Sandra H. Gauvin, supporters of higher education in the cultural arts in Aroostook County. As I said, this plaque will be hung on the wall adjacent to the main doors of the auditorium, recognizing the contributions of the Gauvins to our community. I'm also pleased now to share with you the signage that will be placed on the exterior wall when you come into the auditorium through those main doors. There's that wall there just before the double doors, quadruple doors. So this is what we seen there. Each of these custom design items are in development, as I said, with our vendors, and when current renovations have been completed to Wadene Hall and its gymnasium by our contractor, we'll be installing these the first week of January. All right. So with that, I think I'm going to invite Ray and Sandy up for a quick photo here. So now it says at this time I'm supposed to turn the podium over to our benefactors, but I know that it's actually Sandy that's going to come up and speak for our two benefactors. So, Sandy Goff.
I, on the other hand, do not have to bend over to use mine. Oh, wow. I want to briefly echo Ray's thanks to you all for coming tonight. You are all, please know, you are all so very special to us. Thank you so much. You know, it struck me as I was trying to figure out what I was going to say in my little speech here, that this auditorium really is quite a special place. It's a place where people, actually communities, can come together. It's a gathering place for people who come to be entertained, to enjoy culture, to learn, to be with other people. And in this strange new world we seem to be living in, all of those benefits are so much more important than ever before. I was going to read a little bit about the history, but I won't because it's already been covered by Dr. Rice. Did a beautiful job as always. But I did want to just kind of mention something. I wanted to get your brains working a little bit. I know that the auditorium has very special memories for me, as I'm sure it does for all of you, especially those of you who are of an age like Ray and I are. If you dig deep into your memory banks, I bet you can come up with a time that you remember here as well. My first memories, and I'm so glad Mr. Ladner is sitting there because he'll remember this too. My first memories of the auditorium are in the 50s and 60s, and they involve my dad actually. He was a member of the Lions Club here in Presque Isle, and he was in the early minstrel shows that the Lions Club put on. And I know Mr. Ladner was very active in that too. As he is in so many things. And so my dad being in there, I just thought that he was a star. I mean, I just thought he was special. And I don't know that he ever really did much. He was just kind of in the chorus and kind of wiggling around. I don't think he ever sang because I don't think he could sing. But anyway, so, you know, I'd watch him in those minstrel shows, and every time I go into that auditorium, I think of that. But then I went to a lot more events there, you know, the Pioneer Playhouse and John Cariani's Almost Maine and Ellis Paul's hometown performance, things like that. And then as a teacher, I also went to a lot of educational workshops in the auditorium. So it's always been a special place. And unfortunately, the use of that space has decreased, as Dr. Rice had said. But now with the auditorium renovation project being a reality, I call her she will again be the proud lady that she once was. It was a beautiful place, and it will be again. So again, you've sat and listened long enough. Ray and I thank you so much for being here tonight and all your kind words. So have a great evening and safe travels going home. Thank you.